Right, everyone. Our next talk. So we've previously actually had our speaker at one of our Bytes events, London Bytes events. We enjoyed that so much, we invited him to Con to give a talk on the future of R&D productivity. So please welcome Will to the stage, COO of Plandek.
Hello. Can you hear me okay? Great. I need to get that photo updated. It's a few years old. Thank you for having me today. As it says, we're going to talk a little bit about the future of productivity in R&D or technology software delivery. As many of you who are CTOs know, there's been certainly a renewed focus on productivity last year, and that continues very strongly into this year. As many of your investors will no doubt tell you, they tell us all the time, the cost of capital is very high. Investors are looking for businesses to be a lot more prudent with how they spend money, which in technology terms very quickly translates into productivity. Some markets we see are rebounding, but generally progress is still pretty slow. And when I originally wrote this was actually before Trump was in office. And I think that third one is more important than before. Geopolitics is increasingly volatile. And along with that is a new generation of tools that accelerate productivity, or at least have the big promise to. Across our customer base, more and more of our CTOs are being asked to do more with less. And that's particularly true in the VC and private equity markets. Overall, across our customers, when we serve them, about 19% are reducing their R&D budgets between last year and this year. 31% have implemented cost freezes. A number of those with cost freezes have also had to then improve actual productivity during that time. So it's a freeze of cost, not a reduction of cost, but an expectation of more being delivered. And only about 6% of our customers have reported that they're going to actually be increasing budgets. Now, I'm sure many of you don't need to be told much about this, but both generative AI and now in particular agentic AI, those businesses have done an incredibly good job at marketing the impact of GenAI, right? Whether it's 10% or 15% or 5% or 20%, everyone has a different view of this, but everyone has the same view that generative AI is going to be transformational, improving productivity across teams. Now that said, when most companies have been surveyed, they've seen some impact in terms of benefits on the individual and the wellness, but they've not seen that materialize and translate into actual productivity increases for the team and for the business in and of itself. And I think a big reason is why that is because when you look at GenAI and how it's typically being applied within software delivery is very complex. You have a number of actors working in different capacities and different roles, and that team works together to deliver software. And the automation of a simple task does not necessarily translate into better productivity for the team, okay? So with all that in mind, we think about how do we increase productivity now? We start to prepare for the future of delivery. Today, we're going to go through a few points. One is how do you start to measure and think about productivity in your organizations? How does AI begin to shape how we change the shape of how we deliver, how we organize as teams, and the speed at which we deliver? And how can you as CTOs start to prepare your business and your teams for the next generation of delivery? So we'll start very quickly with productivity. So many of you who have investment-backed businesses will be very well aware that probably the most common way of investors being able to understand productivity within R&D is the simple ratio of product revenues against product costs. They use that quite colloquially across all of their businesses, all of the portfolios. Now, the revenues you're driving is one indication of customer value that you're delivering. So I put together this very simple model of how do we start to think about productivity, because software engineering is not like manufacturing. Everyone likes to talk about, Kanban, it's based off, it's not anything like manufacturing. Manufacturing benefits from the ability to have cars pumped out at the end of the line every single day, right? In software delivery, it's a lot more hidden, it's a lot more virtual, it's a lot more difficult to actually measure the concept of productivity. So when we think about productivity, we like to think about it as how are you spending your development time? How are you spending the capacity you have at your disposal? So this model is a very, very simple model, right? It doesn't go into all of the nuances and complexity of it, but I think it's a helpful place to start. If you imagine yourself with 100% of total capacity, right? Full engineering team, you're able to do whatever you want with them. There's a portion of that work that you're going to focus on critical, essential work, right? And that could be technical debt. If you're working in the banking or a highly regulated sector, you've got compliance work, you've got regulatory work. That work is stuff that you have to do, you have to allocate. But what's important is you need to make sure that you stay focused and control within the remit of how you're spending that time. The other part of it is reducing your unplanned work. And the easiest way to think about this is, say, for instance, with defects. Very simple, very basic example, right? Obviously, you might plan capacity for defects, but you don't plan the specific defects themselves. And a lot of the challenges that clients that we see have is, say, for instance, take your bug resolution time. How long does it take for us to respond to a bug that's been raised? And if it's a lower priority bug, you might put it in your backlog. But the problem is it spends a month there, it spends 2 months there. So when an engineer finally gets to it, they spend a disproportionate high amount of time resolving that non-critical bug or non-important bug. And that completely directly takes away from the amount of time that they would have to be able to focus on value-generating work. And the last base is around the inefficiencies of a team. So how do you measure, how do we start to think about efficiencies, how teams work, how they collaborate, where the bottlenecks are, so we can identify and help them alleviate them. So at Plandek, we've put together this 4 pillars framework, okay? And this is based on both input from a quant perspective as well as qualitative input. But it focuses on these 4 pillars, which is very simply speed, right? So what is the sort of efficiency in which we're able to deliver value to our customers? And there's a few metrics here which I'll put, you can actually go into them a little bit later. Predictability, are we able to plan and execute on our commitments? Having that as part of your DNA is absolutely essential for making sure that you can hit timelines, hit commitments, hit business plans, and be able to then be the critical partner, strategic partner that the business wants from technology. Quality, right? And it's not only from a user perspective. Obviously, we all want to have quality products. We don't want our customers moaning about bugs. Fortunately, our customers are software developers, so they're a lot more sympathetic to the plight than others might be. But also, it's about the utilization of that time and that capacity. Are we able to quickly respond to feedback in such a way that we have a high-quality product, but also that our engineers are maximizing the efficiency of the use of their time, their capacity? And then focus. Are we working on the things that we should be, things that should actually help us deliver value to our customers? Okay? So I want to talk a little bit about how teams will look in the future. Now, I went back and forth on the word future here because I was speaking to one of our customers about a month ago, and very large customer, has quite a few very large-scale products in their portfolio. And a year ago, there was a challenger that showed up in the market, absolutely out of nowhere. And within 6 months, they'd captured 10% of the market share. That product was built using AI technologies, right? So I think for the CTOs out there, one thing to think about in terms of how serious you are taking this revolution is this. The fact of the matter is, next year, your biggest competitor may not even exist yet, okay? Now, what does the team of the future look like, okay? And I can speak with reasonable credibility here because this is a model that we're currently adopting internally at Plandek ourselves. If you think of the old school model, we used to design balsamics, low fidelity mock-ups. We then go through, iterate them into high fidelity mock-ups. You then socialize those with folks in the business or product owners. You then go through multiple iterations. You then send that into development, testing, into production, and then hopefully you're measuring the impact that this has had against your original assumptions and target that you were trying to do with the product in the first place. That's all about the change, and it's changing right now. So the team of the future, you're going to have a product manager and a designer that's able to work directly in tools like Locify, and they're going to be able to produce, within a day, a code prototype that can functionally be taken into development pretty quickly. And I know this because 2 weeks ago, we did a hackathon where we built a whole bunch of new features within our product within 1 day. These weren't mock-ups, these weren't working overnight. This was a few hours worth of work using both Cursor, Devin, Locify, to be able to produce these. Now, the challenge, of course, that many people are going to face is how do we go from code prototype to production-ready code, okay? Oh, that's right. Sorry, I got confused which one's next and which one's now. It's the future versus present debate. I'll be here all day. So this is going to be the challenge, and I don't have a solution for it, but what's interesting is when you start to look at tools like Cursor and Devin, if you provide them with security policies and different development policies, what's impressive is their ability to pick up and learn quite quickly. And if you're using, the product team is using design system components, able to provide those directly into their senior, to your kind of more senior engineer. The label of senior, junior is actually irrelevant now, I think, going forward. But to an engineer who can actually then work with Devin and Devin and Cursor and be able to translate that into production-ready code, which can ship. Now, the real interesting thing here, and this is something we've played around with a little bit, is what it can actually do with operational data, okay? There are two sources that you really care about. One is business KPIs, so that could be feedback coming from Slack, it could be tools such as Intercom, it could be Heap, it could be Google Analytics, business level interfaces, which will then provide information back into the system. What we've tested a little bit is on the support and maintenance side, where these are actually able to monitor logs, audit logs, okay? Can monitor it and actually push a PR to a developer based on a certain incident that's happened. So what's exciting about this way of working is that if you provide the tools with a clear sense of what the sort of business objectives are, okay? Provide them with some audit logs around what's happening in production, whether it's defects or performance-related data, it can monitor, it can read that, it can interpret it, and it can then provide you with a suggested PR to fix this particular issue, okay? Now that goes directly back up into the product owner and the QA and the engineer, who can then figure out what do we do with that? Do we accept it? Do we merge it? Do we do away with it? And that is going to be the feedback loop. And it's going to be a very, very big change in terms of how teams work, the size of different teams, and most importantly, the pace at which teams can deliver, okay? So as it increases, now, in my opinion, is the most important time ever to start to measure. Understand exactly how you deliver software, what's working well, what's not working well, how well set up. Somebody said to me the other day, which I thought was a great point, which I wanted to factor in here somehow. Imagine someone was about to give you 1,000 junior developers tomorrow, right? Is the way that you deliver today able to support that, right? So how do we prepare ourselves for the next generation of delivery? This is sort of things that we're thinking about certainly at the moment and working with our customers on. What we see is certainly going to play a much bigger role is product outcomes. Being very clear from the outset the impact you're trying to have with particular features when you build them, so that that feedback loop can benefit from that and optimize towards that particular outcome. The pace at which you're able to actually build these prototypes and get them production ready is going to increase substantially. So having a clear sense of what are we trying to achieve and are we achieving that is going to be more paramount than ever. Design systems and component reuse, that is going to be absolutely instrumental in terms of taking you from step one into step two and getting code production ready. Test covered automation has always been important. A lot of people are trying to build up pipelines, deploy frequently, and so on and so forth. It's not only essential anymore, it's absolutely critical that you're able to do that. Because as our customer found out, if we aren't able to actually build products as quickly as our competitors will, they will show up and they will eat up our market share quite quickly. What's interesting as well is the human to agentic interactions. So historically, the way we think about software delivery is it's very much a sort of person-to-person endeavor. You look at how people collaborate, how engineers work together, how product teams work together, right? It's measuring human-to-human interaction. As that shifts, it's very important to start to then measure and understand how are people's experience working with these different tools, what's working well, what's not working well, right? So we found recently when we were looking at how people are adopting Copilot and generative AI, that when we actually shift that LLM over to Claude, we had a much bigger intake. Things like this are going to be really, really important to start to look at straight away. I think what becomes less important, right, is more of your sort of historical, let's say historical, I don't even know if lines of code is historical, but some people like lines of code. I think things like that become completely arbitrary. I don't really care how many lines of code agentic AI is writing. I care about the quality of those lines of code. Right? If it requires 100 or 1,000 or 10, the volume itself isn't important, it's actually the quality itself. I think approaches that largely focus on engineering or traditional engineering metrics becomes equally less important because it's going to be far more about engineers engaging with agentic AI as opposed to engineers working together, say, for instance, throughout a pull request process and understanding how folks work together. Most importantly, though, it's going to become about agility, okay, and your speed to market. So when we think about these things, I think the key takeaway here that I would start to focus on today to make sure you're ready for the next generation is in these kind of 4 areas. Flow efficiency is a kind of a general term, but essentially, are you able to deliver as efficiently as possible and all the flow in your, all the waste in your process has been identified and removed as much as possible? As part of that, your automation and your continuous delivery capability. Now, obviously, there are some folks in the room who might be in industries that are limited in the practicality of continuous delivery, and I understand that. And that, I guess, if it's controlled by regulations and so on and so forth, I get it. But for the rest of us, right, this is going to be absolutely essential to making sure that these pipelines are actually able to support the speed at which teams will be able to design and deliver product to market, okay? And what we're all really bad at, and I don't care what anyone says because I've got the proof, we are very bad at engineering and product teams at really being crystal clear on what is the KPI we're trying to drive in the outset and have we been effective at doing that, right? There might be some teams in here that are very good at it, and I applaud you, but generally as an industry, we are not particularly good at that. And that's going to become essential because it's not only going to be a reporting and conversational point, it's going to be instrumental in how we set these tools up and how they operate and how they continue to run. In terms of today, I can't recommend highly enough that folks understand exactly where people are in their journey, who's using these tools, how they're using it, right? What LLM models are working, what LLM models are not working, right? Again, it is going to be very difficult for you to shift the entire organization in new ways of working. So I think at the first step, it's absolutely imperative that folks understand exactly who's using these tools, how they're using it, and then if you can start to see some early indicators of impact, I definitely would do that. I'm not as bullish, I would say, as maybe some other folks in the industry are around quoting the impact of generative AI because I've actually found it very difficult to correlate those in particular. Last year, we ran a study with Visma across 23 of their different companies, looking at teams that have been using it for over a year. And there were weak correlations at best. The data's there, it's very interesting. It suggests a lot of optimism that it can have a positive impact on how we deliver, but it is very difficult to sit there and say, yeah, we had a control group of 6 months with an engineering team where nothing but the tool that they were using changed, because there are a lot of factors that change in the background. So for today, I guess key takeaways is AI is going to fundamentally change how we deliver. Okay? In fact, it already is. It is for our business, it will be for yours, and it certainly is for your competitors. It's essential for everyone, I think, today to start to think about how do we establish a framework within our business, whether you use the 4 pillars or something else. I think just measure something at the moment. Understand what's going well, what's not going well, where the weakness is in our delivery process, whether it's people-related or tooling-related. Have a very clear understanding using data of exactly where those are so you can start to then build a plan against how you remediate those. Speed is going to be the absolute critical part of that, okay? And I would recommend that everyone is obsessed at the moment about flow, automation, continuous delivery, and making sure you get that business and operational feedback loops back into, at least into your heads and the product team at the moment, so that you can then start to use Cursor and Dev in much more appropriate ways. I would challenge you, if you haven't done it today, because I was already, I'd already drank the Kool-Aid. I'm wearing a tinfoil hat already with this stuff. I was absolutely shocked at what our teams were able to produce at the hackathon a couple weeks ago, using Cursor in particular. It was absolutely blew my mind. So if you are planning one, or if you've already had one, I would definitely do it because it will change your mind fundamentally on what's possible and how real this actually is. For those in larger organizations, smaller organizations are going to be, you have a challenge of shifting your whole teams or part of your teams without having a material impact on your roadmap. But for those organizations that are working with a large group of teams, I would absolutely implore you to think about taking 1 or 2 teams and force them into a fundamentally new way of working so they can actually start to build that monolith and what this way looks like, how they can actually deliver, and then see what they're actually capable of in terms of building out new features and functionality for your products. So we're just at the bottom of the stairs. So if there are any questions or comments or anything folks want to say, please feel free to stop by. With the 4 pillars, we have just done done and published our 2025 benchmarks. So there's physical copies below, but if you prefer digital copies, you can get it from right there. Have a read through it. Keen on anybody's thoughts, opinions. Is it, what do you think? What works well for you? What are your experiences, and so on and so forth? Love to talk to you about it. I think it's a very helpful way to start to think about a framework that helps you to productively measure productivity, but also then have useful conversations, not just with your teams and with your leadership, but also with the board as well. Because these are terms and concepts that they can easily get their head around and understand, how do I get more sophisticated than just a pure product revenue to cost model? This actually helps people to start to understand what are we doing to actually deliver that value and what are the core pillars that we work against. That's it.
Any questions coming? I think we've got a little time for questions if we can get them up.
Yeah, please. I to be honest with you, had no.
Cool. Well, when we go to this top one, how do you continue to develop junior engineers into senior engineers and ultimately future people leaders when human-to-human interaction is reducing?
Such a good question. That is such a good question, because that to me is my biggest fear. What happens to the talent pipeline? And I don't know. I'm not going to pretend like I have a good answer for this one here, because I think that's one of the biggest risks of this new model and way of working is that it delivers a lot of value now and a lot of incentive now to move into that model, but it does put at risk your talent pipeline and how do I then develop junior developers and so on and so forth. And as somebody whose son is possibly, hopefully, I don't know actually, about to study computer science, I worry about him as well, right? In terms of what is he going to study, how useful is that going to be in 3 years' time and 5 years' time as these models and the paradigms completely shift. I would say right now, junior developers actually are best placed to start to amend and think about different ways of working, right? So they actually are very, what they lack in terms of seniority and experience and understanding, sort of the quality of code, if you will, they do pick up in their, let's say, flexibility around changing. So I would definitely think about how do I involve them earlier rather than later. In terms of the long play, I don't have a good answer for you on that one. That's a big concern of mine.
On to the next one. When the code is written, where did it go? Where did it go? I'll do that one. When the code is written majority by AI, how do you ensure deep understanding of implementations by humans, or do we no longer need to?
It's another good question. I think, you might not like the answer to this, I don't think humans understand deep implementation of code right now. Okay? There's a natural sort of we do it better because philosophy with these things, which I get, right? And there's a lot behind that. But when I think of our teams, there are certain people who understand certain areas of the code base. Everyone else is dependent on that person or those small groups of people. So I don't think we in of ourselves are very good at deep understandings of it. I think all roles, whether it's in an engineering or a QA side, is really about setting the guardrails in very effective ways for these tools to make sure that they're developing in adherence with the rules that we set. So security policies, for instance, having those very clearly documented and understood, and then testing as the algorithm, the LLM starts to learn from those, that will be more important. But I don't have as much of a fear for it. Maybe I'm just jaded and old, but I don't think we need to. Because I don't think we do today, quite frankly.
Cool. Very good stuff. But thank you very much, Will.